Vision 2030 affects all of us.
And there has to be consequences when there's inaction.
Even during the formulation of the vision.
I think there was nothing wrong with setting the motion.
And even when it was immediately adopted, there were questions, is this realistic or not realistic?
I see an entire community squeezed on one mountain top, and yet some people would own farms that would have 3 or 4 of those similar mountains.
After a tough, long and costly fight for independence, Namibia was finally liberated in 1919. The country had to tackle challenges and all remnants of the previous apartheid regime, such as inequality and discrimination. Then a young nation with a history of divisive policies and a divided society, the nation was anxious, optimistic and hopeful for the beginning of a new era.
The new star has risen on the African continent. Africa's last colony is from this hour liberated.
After the creation of what some regard as one of the most solid constitutions in the world, it was time to send a message that would hopefully permeate through the minds of many Namibians in the form of a country's vision. At the time the document was launched, international bodies, partner countries and experiences from places such as the Kingdom of Malaysia formed part of the expert resources from which Namibia would draw critical lessons.
For our country must be accompanied by an appropriate mission or a roadmap which leads towards the aims and objectives which are expressed in the vision. Your vision is sure to reveal and point to something new beyond what is already available and what is known. Your roadmap towards the future must involve doing things differently, not merely business as usual.
As one of the youngest democracies in the world, Namibia has been lauded for its good rule of law, its vast landmass, as well as peace and stability, which are prerequisites for development. The country is also among the least densely populated, with a population estimated to be at 2.6 million, according to the Namibia Statistics Agency. 2030 is Namibia's roadmap, one that dictates where it wants to be in terms of economy and human capital development. Vision 2030 initially focused on pertinent issues such as HIV/AIDS, inequality and racial injustices, consequently introduced new strategies to help attain the implementation of the document. In this sense, the population growth has put a strain on the country's economic development. So, with population growth and unfolding developmental challenges, government continues to reevaluate and assess the initial goals and plans to align them to current situations. Just like in any other project, monitoring and evaluation to track progress are essential. With only 11 years remaining, just how far have we come in realizing this long-term strategic dream? To gain accurate answers, we must attempt to fully understand Vision 2030. The document finds its premise on 7 national development goals, each covering a 5-year strategic development plan. To date, Namibia is at its 5th national development plan. We take a look at the main goals and the objectives achieved from its inception to date. NDP-1 focused on 4 main goals, namely boosting and sustaining economic growth, creating employment, reducing inequalities in income distribution, and reducing poverty. NDP-2 focused on 8 main goals. 4 are those as in NDP-1, while the other 4 were economic empowerment, promote gender equality and equity, enhance environmental and ecological sustainability and combat the spread of HIV/AIDS. NDP 3 increased the number of goals to 21, with the new goals being, among others, developing reliable infrastructures, ensuring affordable and quality health care, eradication of extreme poverty, strengthening rule of law and social justice, and strengthening international partnership for development. NDP 4 focused on three main goals, namely high and sustained economic growth, employment creation and increased income equality. It also brought in a new element that was not part of other NDPs, that of focusing on the execution of developmental strategies as well as monitoring and evaluation development. NDP 5 focused on four main goals, namely achieving inclusive and sustainable growth, building capable and healthy human resources, ensuring sustainable and healthy human resources, and promoting good governance through effective institutions. The questions on the minds of many Namibians are: has the success rate envisioned in 2004 been achieved? What policies and processes were implemented to monitor and evaluate these achievements? And would it be safe to assume that Namibia was perhaps overambitious when the document was drafted? Did it speak to the reality on the ground? For a better understanding of the vision's objectives, the following graphics display from different areas: targeted vision goals, unattained goals, and the success rates of the goals thus far. Targets that were documented in the first Vision 2030 document were: Vision 2030 predicts that about 80% of the country's population will have proper housing, sanitation, and jobs that earn them an income to enjoy a modest but sound lifestyle. By 2030, the per capita income would have increased to the level of developed high-income countries, according to the policy document. Having a closer look at education targets and access to information and communication technology, as outlined in 2030, several of them could not be achieved. Inadequate housing in Namibia has been a sensitive subject for many. The evident lack of housing has forced some Namibians to resort to living in shacks not suitable for human conditions.
You break the capacity and you take the material, you leave this person outside. Does he know where we are?
Fortunately, the matter received attention in late 2018 after Namibia held its second land conference. Under the Harambee Prosperity Plan, a goal to service plots as well as deliver houses has been highlighted. But to date, the plots and serviced houses only represent a small number of the national backlog, according to the Namibian Democracy Report of 2018. In terms of education, the situation in regard to unattained goals is similar. All schools in Namibia, currently over 1,600, were supposed to be equipped with drinking water, electricity, and furniture by 2006. By 2005, Government wanted to have set up vocational training centers in all 13 regions. This target was also sadly missed, with less than half of the regions being equipped with a VTC. The noble goals of implementing IT training from pre-primary education, virtual internet-based training facilities to reach all Namibians, and free broadband internet access for the public have yet to be implemented. Many Namibians welcomed the idea of free education after it was introduced, but according to an assessment report of 2018, various hidden costs, including mandatory contributions to the School Development Fund, continue to be a challenge for poor families.
It makes me feel happy because they don't have to struggle anymore, because you can, when they don't used to pay school fees, you can see the look on their face. It doesn't look very good because every day we have to struggle to look for school fees, and now the faces are very happy. Now it's good, they don't waste a lot of money on my school fees.
A report on Namibian democracy further highlights that while education is free, its quality leaves much to be desired and requires serious redress. However, according to another report reviewing the status of the Namibian economy issued by the Office of the President in 2016, the country has been able to significantly increase access to education, whereas the quality of education remains a challenge, resulting in high school dropouts and repetition rates. Moreover, education remains a challenge given that above 70% of the unemployed in Namibia have not gone past junior secondary education. Producer Daphne Amuelo led the discussion with various major players to gauge opinions, share experiences and findings around the implementation of Vision 2030 and the complementary Harambee Prosperity Plan. Sylvia Diemos formerly served as former Director of Development Planning at the National Planning Commission and was at the primary stage of Vision 2030 document formulation. She was situated at the office responsible for implementing and fast-tracking the national plans.
I served in various roles. In the position of Director of Development Planning was my last designation before I left the institution. And so the main role in that position was to articulate the implementation strategy of Vision 2030, a process we called from visioning to implementation. I was fortunate enough to be involved in some of these processes. It has been a very enriching process. It required one to keep up abreast with same issues as they were emerging on the international arena.
Diemos recalled how emphasis was placed on the formulation process of the Vision 2030 document. In terms of taking into cognizance the formulation of changes Namibia yearned to see, to identify resources and capacity building measures needed, as well as how the implementation and evaluation process would be conducted.
The process of articulating the Vision 2030 into an implementation strategy was a challenge in itself. But fortunately, within government, there were other reform initiatives going on which were contributing to these changes.
A former negotiator and Minister of Mines and Energy, Obed Kanjode, was appointed in 2018 by President Hage Geingob as the Executive Director of the National Planning Commission. He had to thoroughly acquaint himself with the entire development process by taking familiarization trips throughout the regions.
We had a colonial economy, which economy only looked so much about and cared so much about the previously advantaged white minority. But I think its objectives was to focus on those few issues, to put institutions in place, to close the gap that existed between the many Namibian demographic groups.
According to a democracy report issued by IPPR, in 2016, the economy encountered severe problems. Ongoing struggles in the construction industry, a major employer, crippled that sector. There was also a slow downturn in commodity prices, which eventually saw a sharp decline in Namibia's economic growth. This decline meant that job losses and unemployment counted 676,885 employed, down from 708,895 in 2014, according to the 2016 Labour Force Survey. Namibia officially encountered recession after its GDP shriveled by 2 quarters. Namibia's debt increased majorly from about $36 billion to $60 billion. As a consequence, debt to GDP ratio worried credit rating agencies, of whom Moody's and Fitch downgraded Namibia's credit rating, a move that made it expensive for government to raise money. How did this change affect the vision?
It so happened that a few years into the implementation of vision, the situations changed. There were issues of climatic condition, there were issues of global economic downturn. So one had to now again to continuously think, what can we do to mitigate the situation? But when these issues were at global level, they were very difficult for the country to deal with. And that challenge, unfortunately, has remained with us until today.
Professor Henning Melba, a well-known political analyst based in Sweden, stated that the current strategy needs to focus more on limiting the damage caused by the economic decline witnessed in the last few years. Melba further highlighted that Namibia failed to make best use of the many fat years in preparation for the meager ones and lived above their means in government and administration and did not prepare for the not-so-good times.
In my view, the plans are really delivering what we expect to see, but we must also just be understanding that development process is not a fast process. The economy can grow very fast within a given period and again decelerate very fast within a given period, but development is a process. Some things we see immediately, but some things are not so very easy to see immediately.
Graham Hopwood, on the other hand, believes the ideals set out in the document at the time of the inception were of good faith. The executive director of the Institute of Public Policy Research feels a lot of Namibian core values based on Namibia's constitution were included.
I think the problem has been that we didn't do much after it was approved and it was adopted, and there should have been regular meetings and conferences when we assessed how it was going and whether it was being implemented in the manner and the way that it was envisaged initially. And we really, apart from mentioning in speeches occasionally, haven't really revisited it and said, well, how is this actually working, and is it producing progress, and how does it tie in with our current plans, for example, national development plans or Harambee prosperity plans. So we've neglected it, I think, despite it being a good document.
Both critique and praise have become the norm on social media and other media platforms when talking about the national document's implementation rate.
Each NDP may have had its flaws, the intentions however good, but sometimes humanly possible, you may not attain the same level of progress.
The problem, I think, in general with Namibia is we're quite good at writing plans, but we're not very good at implementing them, and I'm not the first person to say that. But we need to crack this issue of why are we not implementing properly and why are we not keeping to targets. And one of the key areas is not having a roadmap and not having staging posts along every year or every 2 years. With a plan like this, there should have been an assessment of where we are, of what we're doing, and we haven't been doing that. So there's so much more that we could have done, but we could still do that over the next decade to make sure that Vision 2030 at the end won't be dismissed as an irrelevant document.
Government came to the realization that yes, things are not well and it's not what the conditions are not as we expected. Therefore, we need to introduce remedial action. The consideration was probably remedial action on which element of vision. And therefore, the decision was settled with the prosperity. And hence, we have Harambee Prosperity Plan, focusing on Vision 2030, aimed at accelerating the component of prosperity.
Dion Shekuza, a politics graduate from the University of Namibia, has been keeping a close eye on the progress of the vision and spoke to NBC to share his observation.
Some of the major highlights for the Vision 2030 would be focused on the particular problems our government or our state was facing at that particular point in time. And we've done immensely well in those particular issues. For example, HIV and AIDS was a very huge issue by the time we had released Vision 2030. Namibia is about to also reach the zero newborn infections of HIV. And another big highlight for me, I would probably say, is the issue of women empowerment. I've seen our government do good strides in that. I've also seen us do a little bit bad in terms of the inequality. That's one of our major failures, because that is not easier to solve with a policy. It requires a holistic approach. And inequality in Namibia and the gap between the wealthy and the poor is exponentially still a big gap that lies between there, and we haven't done a good job on that one.
Well, as I say, probably if we look at it, there will be some aspects that have gone okay and where there has been progress, and other aspects where things are not on target at all to be where we want to be in 2030. One of the problems, I think, is the overarching vision of Vision 2030, which was Namibians should be an industrialized society. And I think the thinking around industrialization has changed a lot since 2004.
In 2015, the National Planning Commission reported to have successfully coordinated the development of a sustainable national monitoring and reporting framework for the Namibian government. The aim of the framework was to support the government in improving performance and accountability in delivering services and results to its citizens. The framework aims to guide the National Planning Commission and government in monitoring and evaluating its national development plans, which are formulated and implemented to achieve the country's long-term Vision 2030. Lot Ndamanomata, well known for his passion to represent the youth on various matters of importance, especially in the political sphere, has plenty to say about the implementation of Vision 2030.
The issue that we don't want to talk about in the room, perhaps, that has been highlighted, is an issue of also implementation, a lack of proper implementation, and also holding to those to account that are supposed to be implementing specific goals and objectives that allow us to be able to achieve Vision 2030.
The Office of the Prime Minister was advocating on how the public servants should serve the nation, adhere to customer service charter. Performance management system meant that everything that was happening in each institution or at individual level had to be measured, and everybody needs to report according to the plans that were in place. It was a challenge, but in the end we overcame. We developed in the end a national integrated monitoring and evaluation system.
I I know that the cabinet ministers feel they're under attack and they're unfairly criticised. Actually, they don't actually face much pressure to deliver. Only started talking very recently about performance management in terms of cabinet ministers, and even that is not being implemented properly. So, we're just not doing enough, and that's going to fail us because Vision 2030 might not be achieved, but more fundamentally, we're not creating the opportunities for Namibians and the kind of progress we want to see in society that will take Namibia towards being not just industrialized, but a developed nation that will really meet the needs of its people.
In the midst of the economic storm, not all hope is lost, as huge strides were made in some areas. Namibia continues to commit itself to the dream of industrialization, witnessed through some projects such as the Namport Harbour, the 4.2 billion expansion project aimed at realizing Namibia's dream of becoming an international logistic hub for Southern Africa by 2025. The infrastructure sector has relatively done well over the years, and there are notable highlights.
Do we not see the progress? Do we not see the progress in infrastructure development? Infrastructure development is one of our pillar in this country. We have so far really been successful in terms of transport development, logistic, our harbour, telecommunication. All those were, are successes that we see with naked eye. And all that the plan is saying, let us, focus on areas where we have magnitude of success, so that we build on this, and as we succeed on this, then the contribution to others.
We've done pretty well in the smaller parts of the national development plans, but where we have not been able to do a great job is the transformation of our country towards this developed country, because the Vision 2030 stipulates that by 2030 we want to see Namibian citizens living up to par and standard of their counterparts in the developed world. If you look carefully, it's still not evident. You go from one side of the city, from the east, and then the west, and then you find yourself to the south, to the northern part of the city, and you've got two polar opposites, two different realities. One of the things that hurts me the most is when I'm in places like Havana, and I see an entire community squeezed on one mountain top, and yet some people would own farms that would have 3 or 4 of those similar mountains, and you wonder, is that actually parallel to what the vision wants?
Now back to your question, have we achieved? I am sure that many of us can do the simple mathematical question. We are yet to eradicate extreme poverty. We are yet to completely deal with inequities and unequal society that we live in, and many more examples.
Professor Melba, however, commented that they should have the courage to dismiss both Vision 2030 and HPP and start realistic planning from scratch. According to Melba, Namibia does not need grand plans from politicians who are disconnected from the realities on the ground. Instead, so he believes, people need to be sobered down to earth programs, which try their best to make possible what is feasible. In addition, Melba thinks that it would be far less impressive by delivering something instead of making big promises and delivering very little.
Please give us what you promised. Please, we are tired for the promise.
In 2015, President Hage Geingob launched the Harambee Prosperity Plan, a plan that was aimed at fast-tracking Vision 2030. The plan, which is based on 5 pillars, namely effective governance and service delivery, economic advancement, social progression, infrastructure development, and international relations and cooperation to date, was expected to have the following outcomes, which are a more transparent Namibia, a high-performance and citizen-centered culture of service delivery, significant reduction of poverty levels, a reputable and competitive vocational education training system, and a spirit of entrepreneurship and enterprise development. In order to tackle the high poverty rate in Namibian households, Harambee introduced the food bank, an initiative President Keinkop sternly supported, saying that in the Namibian house, no one should go hungry. The food bank, which was first rolled out in the informal settlements of Windhoek and at a later stage to other regions, has had opposing responses with regards to whether it will cause a dependency tendency or solve the poverty crisis at all. But irrespective of critics, for the many Namibian households who go to bed hungry and are unable to sustain themselves, the joy of having a meal delivered to their household is like an answered prayer.
It's a fast-track plan of projects already existing on the national development plans. On most of this is not an extra budgetary plan, but it highlighted on those very key issues like a popular one, poverty eradication. It's one of those, and we see the results, the successes of it. The social provision of support by way of grants, pensions, the food bank, all of that, in my view, are measurable successes. We've seen what is done to poverty. So what has affected not just Harambee, but also national development plans, is of course the economy is not able to deliver at the rate at which it did not so long ago. That tells you we are continually getting less and less and less to achieve the same goals. So that's how Harambee has been affected.
The role of the youth when it comes to sustainable development is an important part of any country's vision. Over 40% of the Namibian population is made up of the youth. But is there a clear understanding and participation of the youth in Vision 2030? The youth's direct participation, or rather lack of comprehension of Vision 2030, is a worrisome aspect, according to Damanomata and Shekuza.
The main obstacle is the youth, because the core principle of Vision 2030 is sustainable development, which by definition is ensuring that current generations utilize resources without compromising the ability of future generations to do so. And I haven't seen very much good emphasis on the youth engagement, youth participation, and also youth mobilization in achieving Vision 2030.
So I think for me, as a way to really give an opportunity and to encourage youth participation is that to bring young people at the center in terms of discussion. So it is good to recruit young people because obviously, and I keep saying that again, that that we are young now, but after 30 years, we'll no longer be young.
It is without a doubt that the vision needs further review at this point in time. With only 11 years left, what more can be done to attain the remaining goals?
Like in any other process of evaluation, I expect this team to evaluate all aspects of Vision 2030, starting from formulation methodology, implementation and advocacy, and whether we are meeting or not meeting the result.
Getting the population to buy into the vision that you have sold to them and say, this is where we want to put Namibia to be in Vision 2030, and also the issue of participation of the public so that they can make it their own.
Touching on capacity, you would also wonder what is the institutional capacity to actually achieve these goals. Because institutions, both on human resource and themselves in terms of their apparatus and governing infrastructure, also have to catch up with the vision and also should be allowed to actually partake. And capacity is lacking in that sense because the fragmentation and working in silos has been happening for quite a while. Our institutions still don't know each other. I'm still yet to see the Ministry of Health sit down with the Ministry of Safety and Security and actually discuss, for example, mental health as an issue to reduce crime rate or drug abuse, for example. So we also need those innovative partnerships between our different institutions, not the traditional way of doing things.
After vigilant examination and pondering on where the vision might have gone wrong, identifying external and internal factors that might have suppressed implementation, the commentators deliberated whether the vision was over-ambitious or not and what would be the best way forward to remedy the current status quo.
We need to re-examine the planning framework to bring into line with the wishes of the population, with the wishes and good intentions of each national development plan.
Probably need to recalibrate that target now and think more about what people are talking about in 2019, which is the fourth industrial revolution, and using technology far more, and even green technology, to advance Namibia as a society and as a country, and to create opportunities for people and the population. So we need to start looking at technological advancements that have taken place since 2004 and the fourth industrial revolution, the opportunities that brings as well as the challenges. And perhaps that needs to be an addendum to Vision 2030 to say, what can we do in the next 10 years to actually make Namibia industrialized in terms of the more modern understanding of what industrialization might mean?
I don't think we're over ambitious. I think there was nothing wrong with setting the motion. The unfortunate thing is that times do change, and especially the economic variable which we do not control, unfortunately. That's where our biggest problem is. We have done something good in terms of planning for it. The problem was always going to be implementation. Well, our founders, were they over-ambitious? No, they were not over-ambitious. I think these were attainable goals, where was maybe to say Vision 2030, the time frame that we should have envisioned to achieve it. Maybe we could debate on that. It could have been Vision 2040 or Vision 2050.
It's a mixed bag. It depends where you're looking at it from and what your position in society is. But if you look at it from an eagle's point of view, you would realize that we are moving in the right direction. We are just not moving fast enough. Our population is growing faster. People are losing jobs faster. The global economy and external environments are also making it very difficult for us to actually stick to our plan, because look at drought now. Government now has to spend a lot of money on drought measures. All that money was probably meant for something else. And because of drought, which we had almost nothing to do with, we are now forced to use the little funds we have. The private sector is still yet to actually fully participate. I would say very much that the private sector's approach is a charity donation, corporate social responsibility, which I don't think is the way forward. I think the private sector should come in as a full partner that can also help us, because when it comes to privatization of state parastatals and resources, you would see there's always an appetite from private sector. But when it comes to actually just supporting the government meet its objectives, people would first find reasons why they shouldn't support before they do so. And when they do so, it's actually up to them as a board, and they sit in a whole different silo as compared to the people who they actually want to help.
To realize any vision, it is imperative to draft realistic programs and to take into consideration the global economy and plan for it. It is also vital to draw new strength by reviewing where the country might have gone wrong, what major implementing and monitoring and evaluation mechanism to put in place to avoid mediocre or incomplete projects hampering development. But perhaps the most important lesson is to draw experience from the outstanding achievements of some of the successful projects. The need for Namibia to formulate a new and better vision for its people after Vision 2030 has come to an end remains a crucial role for all citizens. For now, Namibia should take advantage of the remaining years and try to reach the finish line in time.